Clara has always been one of those people who believe in the power of love. Since she was a child, she dreamed of a simple but meaningful wedding. In the small town of Vale du Sol, where everyone knew each other, her kindness and contagious smile were known by everyone. At 29, Clara felt that she was about to fulfill her greatest dream, to marry Daniel, a charming and dedicated young man who had won not only her heart, but also the affection of her family. They met by chance in a bookstore when she knocked over a pile of books while looking for something inspiring to read. Daniel, who worked there, went to help her, and in that moment, something special happened. What began as conversations about literature and coffee evolved into dinners, laughter, and, finally, a love story that seemed to be taken from a movie. After 2 years together, Daniel proposed. It was on a starry night, at a candlelit dinner, that he placed a delicate ring on her finger and promised to build a future full of shared dreams. Clara, thrilled, said yes, without hesitation, certain that she was on the right path. The preparations for the wedding were intense, but every detail was planned with care. Clara, with the help of her childhood friend, Mariana, chose a dress that seemed to have been tailor-made for her, delicate, with lace details that reflected her soft and dreamy personality. The church would be decorated with daisies and sunflowers, her favorite flowers, symbolizing the simplicity and joy of life that she so cherished. The big day was approaching, and Vale du Sol was thrilled with the expectation of the wedding. Clara, surrounded by love and support, felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Little did she know that her life was about to turn upside down. And so began a story that no one in the town would ever forget. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived. The sun shone brightly over Vale du Sol, as if the universe conspired to make everything perfect. The small church in the town was impeccably decorated with daisies and sunflowers, exactly as Clara had imagined. The residents, friends, and relatives filled the pews, chatting excitedly, eager to see the couple who, in everyone's eyes, seemed made for each other. In the church dressing room, Clara was adjusting the final details of her dress. The reflection in the mirror showed a radiant bride. Her eyes shone with emotion, and her hands, although a little shaky, revealed the mix of nervousness and happiness she felt. Mariana, always by her side, helped with the veil while cracking jokes to lighten the tense atmosphere. Meanwhile, the sound of the church bell marked the proximity of the ceremony. Clara looked out the window and saw the guests settling in. Her heart was racing. There were only a few minutes left until she would enter the church and say the most important "I do" of her life. However, something seemed out of place. Daniel had not arrived yet. Initially, Clara thought he might be caught up in some setback, perhaps a delay with the driver or something trivial. Mariana tried to calm her down with a calm smile. "That happens, Clara. It's just the nerves of the moment. He'll be here soon." But as the minutes turned into almost an hour, Clara's uneasiness grew. The guests began to whisper, and the air of happiness gave way to a murmur of concern. Suddenly, Clara noticed that Mariana was strangely silent, as if something was bothering her. While the entire church waited for the ceremony to begin, the protagonist had no idea that the most difficult moment of her life was about to happen. And the tension in the air only increased as everyone waited for Daniel and for the truth. Clara paced back and forth in the dressing room. The happiness she felt in the morning had turned into a mixture of anxiety and fear. Each tick of the clock seemed to weigh more heavily. "He'll show up," she whispered to herself, trying to convince herself. But something inside her was beginning to say otherwise. The guests, impatient, cast curious and worried glances at the empty altar. The smiles of expectation gave way to confused expressions. Mariana remained silent, looking away whenever Clara asked her something about Daniel. It was as if she knew more than she was saying. Suddenly, Clara's cell phone vibrated. It was a message. With trembling hands, she unlocked the screen. The sender was Daniel. For a moment, her heart filled with hope, but reading the message made her feel as if the ground disappeared beneath her feet. Clara, forgive me, but I can't do this. I'm with Mariana. Please don't look for me. Clara's eyes froze on the screen. She reread the message several times, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was impossible. It couldn't be real. The betrayal was twofold. The man she loved and her friend, who had been by her side throughout the wedding planning. Silent tears began to stream down her face as she tried to process what had just happened. Mariana, her voice came out weak and shaky. Her friend hesitated for a moment, but soon lowered her eyes, unable to meet Clara's gaze. Clara, I didn't want it to be like this, Mariana began, but was interrupted by the sound of Clara's dress brushing against the floor. She didn't want to hear any explanations. The pain was unbearable. Her lifelong dream was crumbling before her eyes. Without another word, Clara pushed open the dressing room door and ran out. The surprised guests watched as the bride, still in her white dress, walked down the aisle with tears in her eyes. She ignored the murmurs and the looks of pity. As she left the aisle, the sky, which had been sunny, began to overcast. Drops of rain began to fall, as if the universe shared Clara's sadness. She ran through the streets of Vale du Sol, barefoot, without direction, leaving behind what was left of her dream. And so, under the rain, Clara faced the most painful moment of her life, without knowing that, in the midst of the pain, something new would begin to emerge. The rain fell more heavily as Clara ran through the streets of Vale du Sol. Her dress, once so perfect, was now soaked, weighing her down as if it carried all the humiliation and pain of that day. Her bare feet felt the cold of the ground, but what really hurt was her heart. Each drop of rain seemed to whisper the questions that wouldn't stop echoing in her mind. Why? How could he do this to me? And Mariana? How was she able to betray me like that? The memories of the happy moments with Daniel and the complicity with Mariana came like arrows, making the blow even crueler. Clara stopped in a small square, without the strength to continue. She sat on a wooden bench, ignoring the rain that was wetting her face and mixing with the tears that kept falling. Huddled together, she hugged herself, as if she were trying to protect what little was left of herself. A few people passed by around her, looking with curiosity and compassion, but no one approached her. Clara felt completely alone. The world seemed to be collapsing around her, and the hope that had always accompanied her was buried by layers of hurt and disillusionment. As she stood there, surrendering to her grief, a black car slowed down as it passed through the square. The driver seemed intrigued by the figure huddled under the rain. After a few seconds, the car stopped and the door opened. A man got out, holding an umbrella. Clara, the male voice called to her, soft but full of surprise and concern. Clara slowly raised her face, her eyes swollen from crying so much. She recognized the figure in front of her. Gabriel? Her voice was weak, almost inaudible. It was an old school friend, someone she hadn't seen in years. Gabriel walked over to her, holding the umbrella over them both. Clara, what happened? You're all wet. Come on, I'll take you home, he said, his tone mixing urgency and care. Without the strength to resist, Clara allowed Gabriel to help her up. He opened the car door, carefully placing her in the passenger seat. While she remained silent, Gabriel drove through the deserted streets without asking many questions. He just looked in the rearview mirror, trying to understand the pain on her face. And so, in the midst of the chaos, Clara found a familiar face again, one that, without knowing it, would be key to helping her rebuild her life. Gabriel parked the car in front of Clara's parents' house, a simple and welcoming house that he knew well from his school days. When he opened the door to help her out, he realized how fragile she was. Clara barely looked up as he led her to the door, where Donna Teresa, her mother, was waiting for them. "Clara, my daughter, what happened?" Donna Teresa ran to hug her, worried when she saw her daughter in that state. Clara, unable to answer, just let herself be enveloped by her mother's affection. Gabriel watched from a distance, feeling a mixture of sadness and a desire to help. After a few minutes, Donna Teresa took Clara to her room so she could change and rest. Meanwhile, Gabriel waited in the living room, sitting on the old flowered sofa, lost in thought. He still didn't know exactly what had happened, but he saw in Clara's eyes a pain he understood well. When Clara came back, now with dry clothes, her expression was still dejected. She sat next to Gabriel, holding a cup of tea that her mother had prepared. He looked at her carefully, waiting for her to speak, but without pressuring her. "Thank you, Gabriel. I don't know how I would have gotten home without you," Clara said, her voice low and choked. "No need to thank me," he replied with a welcoming smile. "Do you want to talk? Sometimes it helps." Clara hesitated, but there was something in Gabriel's gaze that made her feel safe. After a long sigh, she began to tell him everything. Daniel's message, Mariana's betrayal, the public humiliation, and the despair that made her run aimlessly through the streets. Her words were broken by tears, but she felt relieved to get it off her chest. Gabriel listened attentively, without interrupting her. When she finished, there was a heavy silence between them. He finally broke the silence with a calm and understanding tone of voice. "Clara, I know it seems impossible now, but you will get through this. I've been through something similar. My girlfriend of 5 years cheated on me, and I thought I would never be able to move on. But I did, and so will you." Clara looked at him in surprise. Gabriel was known for his calm demeanor and his contagious joy, and knowing that he had faced such deep pain made her feel less alone. His words brought a small spark of hope to Clara's wounded heart. For the first time since the incident, she began to believe that perhaps one day she would find the strength to start over. And in that moment, as the rain outside eased, Gabriel became more than a friend, a safe haven in the midst of the storm that Clara was facing. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Clara. The pain was still a constant presence, but something had changed. Gabriel, with his patience and constant presence, seemed to have brought a little light to the darkest moment of her life. He appeared almost every day, bringing words of comfort, a light conversation, or even just a welcoming silence. One quiet afternoon, Gabriel arrived at Clara's house with an unexpected gift, an old camera. "I know you're going through a lot, but I always thought you had a special eye for the small beauties of the world. Maybe this can help distract your mind," he said, handing her the camera with a smile. Clara hesitated for a moment, but the idea seemed interesting. In the following weeks, she began leaving the house to explore the city with the camera in hand. At first, she took simple photos: flowers in the garden, children playing in the square, birds flying over the church. But she soon realized that this small act of capturing moments helped to alleviate the pain she carried. Gabriel accompanied her on some of these walks. He encouraged her to try different angles, to look beyond the obvious, and, without realizing it, he helped her rediscover a part of herself that she thought she had lost. "You have talent, Clara. Your photos tell stories, just like you," he would say, filling her with confidence. While Clara slowly rebuilt her life, news about Daniel and Mariana arrived sporadically. Comments from acquaintances in the city said that the couple, who had moved to a larger city, were already facing difficulties. The constant fights and lack of complicity were a stark contrast to what Clara and Gabriel were building. One Sunday afternoon, Gabriel invited her to participate in a small photography event in a neighboring city. "It'll be good for you. A change of scenery, new people, new stories. And who knows, maybe you'll discover something you really like," he suggested. Clara accepted the invitation, still a little apprehensive. But on that trip, something different began to blossom. Not just a passion for photography, but a new inner strength and, alongside Gabriel, a kind of comfort she had never experienced before. And so, with small steps and new perspectives, Clara began to rise again, transforming pain into learning and discovering a world of possibilities ahead of her. While Clara rediscovered the joy in the little things, Daniel and Mariana's lives took a very different path. In the city they had moved to, the couple tried to maintain the appearance of happiness, posting smiling photos on social media and showing moments that seemed perfect. But the reality behind the images was different. Daniel soon began to realize that his passion for Mariana did not fill the void left by his choices. He missed Clara's calm and kindness, the way she always saw the best in people and the genuine love they built. Mariana, on the other hand, was becoming increasingly impatient. Arguments between the two became frequent, fueled by small, everyday frustrations. "I didn't give up everything to live a monotonous life, Daniel. If that's what you want, maybe we made a mistake," Mariana said during one of the most intense arguments. Her words echoed in Daniel's mind, forcing him to face what he already feared. He had exchanged something real for an illusion. Meanwhile, Clara continued to blossom. Every weekend with Gabriel was a new adventure. Trips to neighboring cities, where he attended photography workshops, became moments of solitude. It was a discovery for her. Clara began to observe the world with new eyes, capturing simple scenes that conveyed profound stories. Gabriel, always by her side, was her greatest encourager. "Clara, your photos have something special," he said one day as they reviewed some images. "You capture more than the moment. You capture feelings." These words awakened in Clara something she had not felt for a long time: confidence. Inspired by Gabriel, she decided to exhibit her photos at a small local fair. To her surprise, the public loved them. People praised her sensitivity and creativity, and a local gallery owner even suggested that she participate in a larger exhibition. Every step Clara took was a step forward towards rebuilding her life. And every fight Daniel and Mariana had was a reminder of the abyss into which their choices had placed them. In the same city that once brought them together, Clara and Gabriel grew closer and closer, while the echoes of the past grew further and further away. And so, while Clara flourished in her new reality, Daniel and Mariana reaped the consequences of their choices, discovering that illusions have a high cost. Clara's days were now filled with a new energy. The trips with Gabriel, the exhibitions of his photos, and the simple moments, like walks in the square or relaxed conversations, began to draw a new chapter in her life. During one of these trips, Gabriel surprised her. After a day full of discoveries at a craft fair, he took her to a gazebo. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink by the sunset, and the gentle wind carried the scent of seasonal flowers. Clara looked around, marveling at the beauty of the moment. "I always knew you were special, Clara," Gabriel said, breaking the silence. He seemed nervous but determined. "Since you came back into my life, everything started to make sense again. I know you are still healing, and I want you to know that I am here to walk by your side. In your time." Gabriel's words touched Clara's heart deeply. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. Gabriel wasn't just a friend. He was someone who understood her, who encouraged her, and who saw her essence, even after everything she had been through. At that moment, Clara realized she was ready to start over. But this time, with her feet firm and her heart guided by a strength she didn't know she had. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in a distant city, Daniel faced the harsh reality of his choices. After yet another fight, Mariana decided to leave everything behind. "I don't need this, Daniel," she said, without even looking at him as she packed her things. "I thought our life together would be different, but now I realize it's not worth it." Mariana left without looking back, leaving Daniel alone in a room that seemed as empty as his life at that moment. For the first time, he felt the full weight of his betrayal. Regret consumed him, but there was no way to go back in time. While Daniel sank in a loneliness, Clara and Gabriel walked together towards a new stage. Each step they took strengthened the bond between them. Gabriel was by her side at her first major photography exhibition, where his images received applause and sincere praise. After the event, Clara looked at Gabriel with gratitude. "I wouldn't be here without you," she said. He smiled and held her hand. "You've always been here, Clara. I just helped you remember who you are." And so, Clara and Gabriel began to build a new beginning together, while Daniel faced the emptiness of his choices, discovering that regret doesn't erase the consequences. Time passed, and Clara and Gabriel grew closer and closer. The wounds from the past still existed, but they had turned into scars that told a story of overcoming. Clara, now a renowned photographer in the region, felt more confident and happy with Gabriel, who was her safe haven and her greatest encouragement. But the past sometimes insists on knocking on the door. One quiet morning, while Clara was tending to the small garden of her house, the doorbell rang. Surprised, she got up and opened the door. There stood Daniel, his face downcast and his eyes begging for something he didn't know how to ask for. "Clara," he began hesitantly, "I know I'm the last person you expected to see, but I had to come." Clara was silent for a moment, her hand firmly on the door. Part of her wanted to close it immediately, but another part, more mature and empowered, decided to listen. "What do you want, Daniel?" His voice was firm, but not angry. He took a step forward, but Clara kept her distance. "I made the biggest mistake of my life. I traded what was real for something that was worthless. I regret it every day, Clara. I don't expect you to forgive me, but can we try again?" Before Clara could answer, Gabriel appeared in the doorway, his presence imposing and calm. He placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, as if to say she didn't have to face this alone. "Daniel," Gabriel said, his tone serious, "Clara has already made it clear that this chapter of her life is over. It's best for you to go." Clara looked at Daniel with compassion, but without hesitation. "I have found my peace, Daniel, and it doesn't include you. I hope you can find yours too, but it won't be here." Daniel hung his head, defeated. Without another word, he turned and walked back to the car, the weight of his choices more evident than ever. Inside the house, Gabriel hugged Clara tightly, whispering, "You are incredible, Clara. Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that." She smiled, feeling more secure than ever. Despite the unexpected visit, that moment served to reaffirm how much she had grown and how Gabriel was a fundamental part of this new journey. And as the past faded away, Clara and Gabriel continued to walk side by side, building a future based on trust, love, and overcoming. The days continued to be generous to Clara and Gabriel. 2 years after that unexpected reunion in the rain, the two celebrated a life full of love, respect, and achievements. Clara was now a renowned photographer, with exhibitions that touched people in profound ways, showing that beauty could be found even in the most difficult moments. Gabriel, in turn, continued to be the pillar by her side. Together, they planned new adventures, with dreams of traveling the world and, who knows, starting a family. What had previously seemed impossible to Clara had become reality. She had discovered that, even after the worst storms, the sun always shines again. Raphael, on the other hand, had disappeared from the radar of the small town. The latest news was that he was trying to start over in a distant place, but the scars of his choices still followed him. Vanessa was also following her own path, carrying the weight of regret, but seeking to find a new direction for her life. Clara's story wasn't just about betrayal, pain, or new beginnings. It was about strength, resilience, and the courage to move forward, even when your heart felt like it couldn't take it anymore. It was a testament to the fact that true love begins within us, and that when built with respect and reciprocity, it can overcome any barrier. If you've come this far, it's because this story touched you in some way. And do you know why? Because all of us, at some point, face challenges that seem impossible to overcome. But remember, pain can be a springboard to an even more incredible life. That's why we want to invite you to join our community. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any inspiring stories like this one. Share it with someone who needs a dose of hope and strength today. And what's more, leave a comment below to tell us how you overcame the challenges in your life. Your story could be the inspiration someone else needs. Together, we can spread messages of resilience and love around the world. Your interaction not only strengthens our channel, but also allows us to continue bringing you content that truly makes a difference. So, how about helping us reach more people? Like, share, and subscribe now. Let's work together to build a space where moving stories transform lives. And remember, happiness is not the destination, but the journey. And this journey, when taken with courage and faith, can take us further than we imagine.